Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to talk about the design process for the Iowa Class Battleships. This has been covered in a number of books, but every time I've seen it, it tends to be they're working on changing the guns, and here's the timeline for that, and they're working on changing this, and there's a timeline on that. It's never been everything in one straight list to see how these different pieces are moving together. So I'm put it all together in chronological order. We're going to talk through that real quick, which might include a little bit of jumping around, and we'll see how enlightening that is to the design process. So the first point I have in my timeline, April 1937, Japan and Italy refused to sign the Second London Navy Treaty, which will trigger the escalator clause in the future. Second London Naval Treaty was part of the ones that limit the size of battleships to 35,000 tons, and the Second London Naval Treaty in particular limits the caliber of guns to 14 inches, unless other countries do not sign, in which case the escalator clause goes in and you increase the main gun battery to 16 inches and the displacement to 45,000 tons, which is what the Iowa class were originally designed under. On 27 October 1937, so just a few months later, North Carolina becomes the first U.S. battleship laid down in nearly 20 years. She is one of the older 35,000-ton battleships, and she was originally designed to have 14-inch guns, but with the London Naval Treaty not going into effect, they're able to increase the size of the guns to 16 inches, but they cannot increase the size of the ships this late in the process. 15 December 1937, planning begins for a fast battleship in the 1939 program. So these original plans are not really limited by numbers. They look at what weight will it take to get a ship up to this speed. So on 17 January 1938, Captain A.J. Chantry produces the first of the designs that will lead to the Iowa class. It is the so-called cruiser killer design, has 12 16-inch guns, only armored against 8-inch shells, but is capable of steaming at 35 knots. In February of 1938, he completes designs A, B, and C, which are other looks at what will a fast battleship need to look like. And these have combinations of guns. At one point, 18-inch guns are looked at, 6-inch secondary guns are looked at. But they're kind of their own loose, separate thing away from designs of other ships. And in the end of the day, they influence the design because we're starting to realize how heavy a ship will have to have these capabilities, but they don't directly lead to the Iowa class. In March 1938, the escalator clause actually goes into effect. So at this point, about a year after Japan refuses to sign, everybody says, all right, escalator's in effect. Japan is building new ships at this point, and we're fairly certain that they're larger than 35,000 tons. But we think that they're probably around the 45,000 ton range. Man, were we off on that. That same month, the Battleship Design Board asks for a new design process that looks at upgrading the South Dakota class designs, which at this point are already completed, rather than the loose designs that Chantry's been doing that are unassociated with other ships. They also agree that it would require 4 64-foot-long engineering main spaces to be able to house a power plant, roughly 200,000 horsepower, to get a ship up to the fast battleship speed that they want, somewhere between 32 and 35 knots. In May of 1938, the Second Vincennes Act creates funding to increase the Navy by 20%. Originally, it looked like we were only going to be able to build 2 Iowa-class battleships, but with the increase in funding, 4 are guaranteed, and then they start looking at designs for the future Montana class as well. At the end of the day, it will be 6 Iowa class that are authorized just because that plan is further along than the Montana class, and the Montanas never get built. June 2nd, 1938, the General Board sees the proposed plans for the expanded South Dakota class, and they're able to start reviewing them. On 20 August 1938, they reconfirm that 4 64-foot engine rooms will be needed. On the American fast battleships, they look at 4 engineering main spaces, even though those are huge interior volume spaces that, if they flood, could cause a lot of damage. What's worse, if a torpedo hits in the worst possible place, Murphy's Law, a bulkhead between 2 of the engineering spaces, it means that you've got roughly an eighth of the total ship flooding, and more like a fifth or a sixth of the full width of the ship, because the bow gets very narrow, not very buoyant. So that could do a tremendous amount of damage. So the Navy is looking at, they keep asking, well, can we make these spaces smaller? Because the South Dakota and the North Carolina class have smaller power plants, their engineering main spaces are not 64 feet long, so the Navy's less concerned about a hit there. The Iowa class, they're starting to see this as an issue, and it's not going to be resolved until much later in the design process. And of course, you can't fix one thing without causing other problems. Just a little foreshadowing there. 14 October 1938, the general arrangement drawings are sent to the contract design branch. So by this point, they have a pretty solid idea. It's going to be 9 16-inch guns. There's going to be 2 triple turrets forward, a triple turret aft. They're going to be about 860 feet long at the waterline, a little over 100 feet wide overall to still be able to fit through the Panama Canal. They've got things mostly nailed down at this point in the design process. The next month, in November of 1938, while refining the contract design, the Bureau of Ordnance and the Bureau of Construction and Repair realized that they designed a turret that was 2 feet too wide to fit in the hull that had been designed. So Bureau of Ordnance is designing the guns, Construction and Repair is designing the hull. Bureau of Ordnance gave CNR basically a menu of options, and they walked away from that meeting believing that they had chosen different options. So the guys designing the hull want a barbette with an internal diameter of 37 feet, and the guys designing the gun turrets think that they're building a gun turret with a 39-foot diameter, which will not fit in the hull with the torpedo defense that they need. So Bureau Ord is the ones who are generally acknowledged as being the ones who messed up here. So they're told to go back and fix their gun turret by hook or crook. So on December 27th, 1938, the preliminary design branch is sent revised general arrangement drawings. And this is where the change from the Mark II 16-inch 50 caliber gun is turned into the Mark VII 16-inch 50 caliber gun, which is a lighter gun and is able then to fit in the smaller barbette. So over the next 6 months, they work on the contract plans. 17 May 1939, Bureau of Ships is sent the draft contract plans to the Navy yards for comment. The New York Navy Yard, building the lead ship of the class, will be the lead ship on this program, so they get to comment on it. 16 June 1939, the contract plans are signed and issued. So at this point, you can start the detailed design phase. 1 July 1939, so 2 weeks later, Iowa and New Jersey are ordered. 5 July 1939, South Dakota is actually laid down. So notice North Carolina has been laid down. She's not complete yet. The South Dakota class design, which is leading into the Iowa class, is already being laid down. The Iowa class designs are already pretty close to being finished and have been ordered, but we haven't put a fast battleship in the water yet to start testing, hey, do any of our theories about these ships actually work? That's going to come back later on too. More foreshadowing for you. But it's a good thing that they're laying all these ships down quickly, because on September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, and that starts the spiral of World War II in Europe beginning. England and France deliver ultimatums. Within a couple of days, the lights will start to go out all over Europe. The United States, of course, is looking at this and is looking at how it can prepare its own defense as well. Around this same time period, the plans are still being revised, and things like moving the Combat Information Center into the armored part of the ship from the superstructure, increasing the anti-aircraft guns from 1.1-inch Chicago pianos and 50 calibers to 40 and 20 millimeters, and revising the foremast so they can hold more electronics such as radar antennas, are all being worked on. September of 1939, underwater tests are conducted on South Dakota's torpedo defense system, and they prove to be deficient. This is deficient against American torpedoes. We don't even realize yet that the Japanese are building even bigger and more powerful torpedoes. So this starts a panic because it means that North Carolina, South Dakota, and the Iowa class all have deficient torpedo defense. Some of these ships are already under construction. The South Dakotas are under construction in private yards, which means that you have to pay extra if you're changing the contract. Fortunately, the Iowas are under construction in public Navy yards, and so it's much easier to change the designs after they've been authorized, which is probably why North Carolina, Washington, and the Iowa class are all built in public yards, because they foresaw that there would be changes, because they're building them bam, 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 bam. And the South Dakotas are very much a better redesign of the North Carolinas. After that escalator clause has gone into effect, they're designed with 16-inch guns and armor from day one. And the Navy thinks they're going to like the system, which is why they just stretch that out for the Iowas. But they haven't seen it yet until these tests, which don't come until September of '39, with all the South Dakotas already laid down. October 30th, 1939, the Bureau of Engineering holds a conference to discuss the problem of underwater protection that was discovered about a month earlier, and they propose going to a 6-engine room configuration for the Iowas. This would be 4 combined engineering main spaces with boilers and engines, and 2 spaces with the turbo generators in them, rather than having the turbo generators in the engine rooms where they are today. They figure if our torpedo defense isn't going to be effective, at least we can reduce the amount of space that's flooded when it's defeated. 6 November, about a week later, a second conference is held, and they decide to break the engineering main spaces into 8 32-foot-long spaces instead of 4 64-foot-long spaces. This is going to add extra weight, but World War II has already started. The treaties are out the window. We don't care about those anymore. We can build a ship that's heavier than 45,000 tons now. So adding that extra internal subdivision, that weight isn't going to be a problem. So now they're able to move the boilers into their own fire rooms, and the engines and turbo generators into their own engine rooms. This also reduces the number of penetrations through the deck for the boiler uptakes, and really makes it a better internal arrangement, but it requires rearranging where all those uptakes are going. They're coming from the bottom of the ship all the way through the hull and superstructure. So even though New Jersey and Iowa have been authorized, we're still making major revisions to the plans. November 27th, 1939, the Bureau of Construction and Repair sent the resulting instructions to the Navy yards about these changes. 22 January 1940, they issue revised plans for the hold and inner bottom. The next day, they issue revised plans for the third deck and first platform deck. And 25 January 1940, revised plans come out for the main and second decks. So they're pretty rapidly making the revisions to these plans to get them out to the yards, because these ships are going to start construction soon. And these are just general arrangements. You don't have the detailed plans for the spaces. The general arrangements say where major things are going to be, but now we got to figure out, well, where's the plumbing going to go through to get water to this? Where's the chair going to be that this guy sits in when he's monitoring this? So they have to get these out quickly. 1 February 1940, Alabama becomes the last South Dakota class battleship laid down. 1 June 1940, Washington is launched, which clears her ways for the Iowa class to start being built in Philadelphia. 12 June 1940, Missouri and Wisconsin are ordered. 13 June 1940, North Carolina is launched, clearing up her ways, which is where Iowa and Missouri will be built. Iowa being built next to North Carolina, Missouri being built in North Carolina's ways. But these ways were for ships that displace 35,000 tons. They have to be modified for ships that are going to be 10,000 tons heavier, which is why there's a little bit of a period between when these ships are launched and when the ways are improved. There tends to be 2 large ways next to each other, so while North Carolina and Washington are under construction, the ways next to them are being improved for Iowa and New Jersey, respectively. As they're under construction, once you've launched the 2 North Carolinas, their ways get improved for the next 2 Iowas. So, now that North Carolina is launched, the ways next to her have been completed. On 27 June 1940, just 2 weeks later, Iowa is laid down. 18 July 1940, The Chief of Naval Operations orders a second set of plotting rooms installed back aft. 13 August 1940, about a month later, revised plans for that aft plotting room are added. That involves deleting the berthing spaces that were going to be in that area, and it cuts into the deck in that aft engine room. 9 September 1940, Illinois and Kentucky are ordered. So the first Iowa has just been laid down, but they've already ordered 6 of the class because the plans are so much further along than the Montanas that they didn't want to stop there and wait for plans to be completed because they're still trying to do the revised plans for the Iowas. 16 September 1940, New Jersey is laid down in Philadelphia. 6 January 1941, Missouri is laid down, and instructions go out ordering the omission of portholes in the hull. They're already starting at looking at wartime modifications for these ships. This is a year before Pearl Harbor. 25 January 1941, Wisconsin is laid down. So that means that they were able to fix the ways in about 6 months. 9 April 1941, North Carolina is the first American battleship commissioned in 17 years and the first American fast battleship commissioned. So now we finally start to get feedback on corrections that are needed for these ships. This is April of 1941. It will be almost a full year before these corrections are carried out on North Carolina and she's actually combat capable and deployed to the Pacific. So you can see how quickly this pipeline is moving forward and how little time we have to make changes based on real-world experience. 15 May 1941, 1 month later, her sister ship Washington is completed. So they're coming out quick now. The South Dakotas will be just behind them, which is good because there's a war going on in Europe and we're going to be involved very shortly. Another spoiler there. 7 June 1941, South Dakota is launched. 31 July 1941, plans for strengthening the third anchor support on the Iowa class are issued. So they're still doing changes on these ships. They're under construction and they're changing things that are going to be installed on second deck on these ships. 12 August 1941, the recommendation goes out, this is a month later, to add an additional stiffener for that anchor. 7 December 1941, Pearl Harbor is attacked, and on the next day the United States enters World War II. 7 March 1942, Kentucky is laid down. 20 March 1942, South Dakota is commissioned. 23 March 1942, a conference is held in New York to discuss simplifying the plans for the Iowa class and the South Dakota still under construction to see if we can get them out faster now that we're in the war. We did a video on that. There's a link to that in the description down below. There are 49 simplifications proposed. 47 of them are adopted. That same day, it seems, a memo goes out to the shipyards telling them to draw new plans, deleting certain features. So that includes things like that third anchor and the stiffener that was going to go under it that just a couple of months ago they're looking at how they can make that better. So 23 April, that anchor plan is declared void. 7 May 1942, the Battle of Coral Sea is fought. The first battle where two navies are fighting each other and they don't see each other's ships. It's a carrier battle. 4 June, the Battle of Midway is fought. 13 June 1942, a report comes out on the effectiveness of converting the Iowa Class battleships into aircraft carriers. The report says the first 2 are too far along for it to be worthwhile. Missouri and Wisconsin are at a perfect place if you want to redesign them. They'll be close to the effectiveness as Essex-class aircraft carriers, except much more expensive with much more armor. And the third pair, Illinois and Kentucky, if you want to turn them into aircraft carriers, scrap them now and lay down Essex-class on their building ways instead. At the end of the day, it's decided to retain all 6 Iowas as fast battleships and continue construction of them. 29 June 1942, the Bureau of Ordnance sends a letter that finally approves the simplifications from 3 months earlier. Which is incredible because the next month, 27 August 1942, Iowa is launched. 19 October 1942, Iowa's already in the water and they finally hold a conference to figure out what radars are going to be held. This was one of the points that was discussed at that earlier meeting about design simplifications. and they had decided that they would hold a separate conference to do it. It seems like they kept delaying this conference because radar technology was improving. So that's also one of the later things that's installed in construction. You don't have to wait until you've installed the mast that you're starting to worry about that. So it seems like a low priority compared to all of the other changes that they're making during this time period. 6 December 1942, Illinois is laid down in the same slipway that New Jersey is being completed in, and they're able to do that on 6 December because 7 December, New Jersey is launched. 22 February 1943, Iowa is commissioned. 23 May, New Jersey is commissioned. The end of the year, they're launching Missouri and Wisconsin, and mid next year they're commissioning Missouri and Wisconsin. Illinois and Kentucky never get completed because priority is given to other projects. So you can see with the war going on and with the number of ships that the Americans are trying to pump out quickly, there is very little time for change. And the Iowa process, while not as tortured as North Carolina, where they weren't sure what they wanted the future battleship to look like, is tortured in that they knew what they wanted it to look like, but then they had to figure out the details without a whole heck of a lot of experience from operating these new ships. So what do you think? Do you like seeing things in chronological order like this, or do you like how you've seen it in the books before, where it talks about, all right, let's talk about the guns and the various changes that are made there, and the engines and the changes that are made there, and those all being separate discussions? Let us know in the comment section down below if you like a combined thing like this, or if you'd like to see more on those individual processes. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to continue supporting the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.